To India, Eric Garcetti. Ambassador Garcetti, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Great to be with you, as always. Thank you.
When you speak about climate and green energy, this has been discussed at the highest level. It's there in every India-US roadmap for the future. Tell us, what is your vision and the Biden administration's vision right now of the partnership on both these fronts?
Well, like most things with the United States-India partnership, this is extraordinary. What we can do together is so much bigger than just the US and India. It's not just what we can do together, India plus the US, but India times the US. In fact, the first time I met Prime Minister Modi was in Glasgow when I was representing the cities of the world as then the mayor of Los Angeles. As we made our pledge to get to carbon zero, and India did the same thing. We did it back to back on the same stage. And ever since then, I've had a really keen eye on what India is doing, inspiring the world, impressing the world with technology, with desire, and a recognition that at the end of the day, this isn't about statistics. This is about people. This is about our health. This is about our own families and our own communities. And I think that's the perspective that the Biden administration has, domestically in the United States. But we know that as much as we can build up green sectors on buildings, transportation, fuels, electricity, at the end of the day, carbon ignores borders. We need India to do well, and India needs the United States to do well. But we can do things not only in our own countries, but together throughout the developing world and other parts of the world. To me, that's one of the most exciting parts of this relationship.
Right. When it comes to climate change, the US has been speaking to India and other nations as well on moving away from fossil fuels. What are the concerns around climate change which you have expressed to India recently, and what are some of the deliverables in this partnership on climate action?
Well, I think we don't come here to preach and to teach. We come here to listen and to learn and collaborate. I see things here every day that are great lessons for us in the United States, and vice versa, whether it's something like the ambition of India to electrify its train system, something that USAID, our development corporation, is doing here together with Indian Railways, is a great example of how we can use our technical expertise, India's incredible expertise in trains and building out new infrastructure, and deliver something that's good for the customer and good for the environment. Similarly, 10,000 electric buses. We saw India was putting out tenders in cities to have buses that used to spew diesel to potentially have zero emissions and clean up the air in cities that badly need cleaner air. But nobody was answering those because there was no guarantees on the purchases of those buses. So the US, together with the Indian government, stepped forward to guarantee those purchases, and now we're seeing that accelerate even more. So we're looking to where we can find any holes in the financing, technological breakthroughs that we can share quickly with a friend and a collaborator like India. And we're working everywhere from the central government to down to the smallest villages throughout India.
Right. Now, you spoke about the payment security mechanism for electric buses. Today, India is considering an ambitious plan to have 800,000 electric buses on India's roads by 2030. Now, that is a very ambitious number. We want electrification to take place in a substantial manner. Are there any discussions to support electric mobility in India in the next phase?
Absolutely. From guaranteeing some of those bus purchases to looking also at things like charging infrastructure and three-wheelers and ways that maybe one day we can see exports from India. If we can see, and I've been on one of those electric buses made right here in India. The quality is great. We're seeing in America oftentimes we only have options to buy from one country in the world. We want to see India do well for India, but also be part of the green supply chain for the United States and for the world.
Right. Now, if I were to ask you about some of the key pillars of Indo-US cooperation on climate and clean energy, how would you put that?
You know, I think that India and the United States are always stronger together when we're working on climate. When it's not an us versus them mentality of the developed versus the developing world or East versus West. And I think the depth and warmth of our relationship usually completely breaks down those false divisions. It shows us that two great nations at different points in their development history really have so much more in common than what divides us. For instance, at the recent COP that happened in Dubai, we came together and are putting a $1 billion fund, half of it from the United States government, our Development Finance Corporation, half of it from the government of India, to be a place to accelerate green infrastructure and energy investments here in India. And vice versa, we're seeing investments from Indian companies, $1.5 billion to do solar manufacturing, to do elements for batteries for electric vehicles, Indian companies in the United States. So I think if you told somebody 20 years ago Indian companies would be creating jobs in America, leading in technology, they would have said, are you sure? Now it really is a two-way street where we get as much benefit as we give. And the more that we give to each other, the quicker we can get to where we need to in reducing emissions.
You spoke about the Development Finance Corporation. They have invested quite heavily and regularly in the renewable energy ecosystem in India, and also some of the biggest companies in the renewable energy space, like Adani as well. I would like to specifically ask you, what are some of the opportunities that you see for US investments in the renewable energy space in India in the next few years?
Well, we're so excited. The Development Finance Corporation, or DFC's #1 country, favorite place in the world, is right here, India. About 10% of all the business that we do in the world is in India. The next biggest country is about 1/4 of that globally. So we love India, and we want to see more and more green deals. So my message, first and foremost to your viewers, if you're a company, a community, a state government, central government that is looking for accelerating financing, come to us, because we are open for business and we love working in India. But whether it's down in Chennai, where we helped open First Solar, an American company that manufactures solar photovoltaic cells that don't depend on some of the same critical minerals that right now are throttled by a single country, we saw jobs created, over 1,000 of them right here in India, an amazing high-tech plant that's giving technology and expertise to India. And we think this is going to manufacture not just solar cells for India, but can be exported from India to other parts of the region and the world. So that's a great example. Transportation, think about air conditioning and efficient ways to cool people while we deal with the heat that is the effect of global warming, but also be able to create more jobs here. That's another place we want to see green manufacturing. And of course, in the transportation space, where I think India is poised not only to create great electric vehicles for India, but also for the world.
Right. You've been emphasizing on how you don't want to just focus on the India-US green energy partnership only for India, but also exporting it back to the United States. What are currently the level of green energy component exports that you see from India to the United States, and how much do you want to increase it to?
It's significant, but still small. I think the sky's the limit. I think that we can look at taking advantage, for instance, of the Inflation Reduction Act, which we encourage Indian companies to do. Come and help us get green hydrogen, help us look at the fuels of the future, manufacture the components for the batteries that we'll have to store energy in or that can power vehicles. America has low taxes, is a very transparent place to bring your intellectual property. We can protect your ideas, we can enhance your business, and we can grow your bottom line. We are very proud last year that the #1 country to send investors to our annual Invest in America conference called Select USA was from India. And so this June, it's a really great time, June 23rd to 25th, come and look at opportunities to build your plants, invest, and sell your products in the United States directly.
Right. You spoke about the Inflation Reduction Act, and this promises to deploy $369 billion in incentives. How can Indian companies take advantage of these incentives in the United States? And what are some of the things that you would probably recommend them to watch out for?
So the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA as we call it, is the largest piece of green legislation in world history. Not just American history, but ever in the history of the world. And it doesn't discriminate. You don't have to be an American company. You just have to be willing to invest in America. And by the way, you can export out from America to the rest of the world. So it really works for jobs outside of the United States as well as inside the US. I would say a couple things. Find out where you want to be. Be close to universities where there's great research and development. Go to states where you see a positive pro-business attitude, low taxes. Find the places where there's clusters of similar businesses, because we want American and Indian and other businesses to create centers of excellence so that, again, no one country can throttle the refining of precious metals that are key components to many of the future green products we need, that can look at manufacturing together, that can have technological innovation. Another great example is with small modular reactors, nuclear power, which will be very important for the green future. We're seeing Indian Americans who have companies looking to invest and create jobs in India, and vice versa, companies that could come from India and do the same in the US.
Right. When you speak about having a strong supply chain of green energy components, what is your view on the current situation around the world? There have been concerns around dumping of cheap and low quality solar energy components. How do you think that this alliance between India and US on green energy can benefit not just the two countries, but the Indo-Pacific and the world as well?
I think every country benefits when we have a diverse supply chain and multiple options. It's part of the reason that I'm here as ambassador. I want to see India become not only a great domestic market, but really a manufacturing center for the region and the world. We need more options in the United States. And we see the success of this in healthcare, for instance, where 40% of our generic pharmaceuticals come from India. That's a positive for the health of the people of Los Angeles. And in the future, if India can be not just a great creator to green sectors inside the country, but an exporter of those products, those vehicles, those solar cells, those fuels of the future, that's a good thing for the entire world, which is why the U.S. is so invested. Somebody said to me the other day, why is the U.S. so excited about India? And I said, because it's such a unique country. Name one other country that has the scale, that has the size, that has the brilliance and the expertise like India that the United States can partner with anywhere else, that's growing like we are at the strongest rate in its respective column. You know, you're the fastest growing developing world economy. We're the fastest growing developed world economy. It's a match made in heaven, but we shouldn't rest on our laurels. Just because things are good, it's time for us to take them to great and to make sure that they're great and green.
Right. I'd also like to ask you about the partnership in the Indo-Pacific when it comes to green energy exports. Are there certain aspects of green energy, of biofuels, green hydrogen, maybe the critical minerals which are required for electric vehicles? Are you talking to India about having a supply chain, having a mechanism in place where these components can be available to countries in the Indo-Pacific? You have tried to strengthen Philippines along with your ally in Japan, but is there some sort of a similar plan to strengthen green energy exports to the Indo-Pacific through India? Is there some conversation underway?
Every day we're talking to our friends here in India about how we can partner together and with our common friends, partners and allies, for instance through the Quad, with Australia and Japan, with South Korea, which has huge technology and expertise in the battery sector. How can we be a kind of like-minded group that sometimes formally, but often informally, maybe you're the best place to mine the materials, you're the best place to refine them, you're the best place to then transform them into a product that's usable in the marketplace. But we have to be strategic, because when a single country throttles any marketplace and can make those decisions in a single political entity, it's a little easier. But it's also a threat to all of us and a threat to prices in the world, to jobs in the world, to the economy of the world. And so everybody benefits from it. This is not about being anti-anyone. It's about making sure everybody writes that future together. And India will play a critical, if not the critical role, I think, in that future that we're looking at.
Right. Now, when you speak about green energy, now there are various aspects of green energy. You've got wind, you've got solar, you've got green hydrogen, biofuels. We are ourselves coming up with roadmaps and schemes to increase the adoption of renewable energy in the country. But within this, are there certain specific segments that would be a priority for you?
Absolutely. I mean, we just had one of the largest trade missions from our agricultural sector, and thanks to reduced tariffs, we're seeing great American food in Indian markets. But one of the things we produce in the agricultural sector, both in India and the United States, is ethanol and biofuels. And during G20, U.S. came together with India to found the Biofuels Alliance, International Biofuels Alliance, which builds on the International Solar Alliance, which India, of course, founded and co-chairs. These are great examples, I think, of the fuels and the electricity generators of the future that have to be priority number one. But second, I would say, what are the highest emitting sectors? Whether it's cement, whether it's coal, whether it's steel. How do we bring down carbon in those sectors? And in some cases, provide alternatives, alternative building materials so that we don't have to use as much energy, alternative fuels, so instead of expanding coal and polluting the air even more, maybe nuclear, or again, stored solar and wind can help us reach stable, cheap, but also green electricity. So I would highlight those. One last thing I would say is buildings. Buildings, I think, are going to be a critical piece of the future. India can do so much to create greener buildings that require less electricity to be consumed and keep people cooler on hot days and warmer on cold days. And we're very interested in solutions coming out of India and ways we can bring solutions here too.
All right, Ambassador, just hold on to that thought. We're going to take a short break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with this interview with US Ambassador Eric Garcetti. Welcome back. You're watching our exclusive conversation with US Ambassador to India Eric Garcetti on the US-India Climate and Green Energy Partnership. Ambassador Garcetti, thank you once again for joining us. I'd also like to ask you about the regulatory environment. Now, one thing that the India-US diplomats are always working towards in every forum is to simplify regulations for businesses. When it comes to green energy cooperation, what is your expectation from the Indian side, or would there be any kind of regulatory hurdles which you feel need to be eased?
Look, I think it's a good question for both sides. We find some Indian companies doing business in the US say you've got too much bureaucracy. Similarly, we hear that all the time. I would say for my Indian friends, really a lot of this comes down to states. And those states that are the most business ready and business friendly are going to be the states that you're going to see more American investment flow into. First Solar had a great experience down in Tamil Nadu, which made it easier. You have states like Gujarat and Maharashtra who are kind of hustling for the business to bring manufacturing of green products. Those places that put an emphasis of the time you spend from idea to opening up a factory or a headquarters and creating more jobs, I think those are the places that will win this. And there's a lot of jobs in this. I mean, one message I'd say loud and clear to every Indian policymaker as well as business person is there's a ton of jobs. When I was mayor of Los Angeles, we had the fastest growth rate of jobs in America. That was because we put an emphasis on those environmental and green jobs. About 3/4 of them came just from those sectors alone.
I'd like to ask you, when you speak about regulatory easing, the Indian government has recently agreed to lower tariffs on imported electric vehicles. Now, one of the companies in consideration for that was Tesla as well. Well, Elon Musk's visit has been postponed, but on the whole, how do you see this policy to attract global investments, including the likes of Tesla?
You know, the electric vehicle policy is a great policy. It's smart. It came from listening to producers and those companies that have done this in other countries. And I think it will be great for domestic as well as for foreign investors who are trying to build an electric vehicle infrastructure. I know that Indian manufacturers can compete and win, not just here, but probably in the future exporting to the rest of the world. But vice versa, for a lot of companies that were looking at it here, they said, give us a few years where you don't tax at this super high rate the vehicles we make today, and we'll promise to little by little work the supply chains so that we can make them here in India tomorrow. That's really smart. It's keeping the leverage and demanding you give something to India, but it's also not stopping the investment before it even happens.
But do you feel that there is more interest in the electric vehicle ecosystem, not just from Tesla, but other American companies as well?
No question. I mean, American companies who have manufactured cars, it's a tough market in India. You have to know your segment. We've had some fits and starts, but we also see the transformation of the car industry fundamentally. We know Tesla's excited. We know that Elon will be here later on. They'll talk about that, not just investment, I think, in electric vehicle sales, but creating jobs and creating an ecosystem of people who can create the electronics that really fuel these cars. But I think that will just be the beginning, and you'll see that come from European and other foreign manufacturers as well.
Right. Now, I would also like to ask you, when it comes to deploying funds to speed up India's green energy transition, are there particular sectors where you expect the US government to focus on? Is there any kind of funding under discussion right now?
Absolutely. I think we look at the biggest areas are electricity and power generation, transportation, and of course then looking at more broadly buildings and high-emitting sectors. We want to see India's breathtaking pace of being able to build out renewable energy, which we're seeing accelerate faster than any country in the world. But a lot of that energy can't be used on a daily basis. So how can we help store more energy? How can we help also supplant the growth of old energy, whether it's coal or oil or other things, with nuclear and other green steady state ways of getting electricity? That would be first. Second, we talked about transportation. I think we all know, any of us who live in a city like New Delhi, you can do all the things you want to create better, greener electricity, but as long as there's a lot of cars and vehicles that are stuck in traffic, it's going to be a lot more carbon, a lot more pollution, a lot more emissions. So we are looking at helping both on the public and private sector there. And then I think third, it's how we live. It's the buildings that we're in that consume most of the energy. And it's great to see the LIFE initiative, which Prime Minister Modi put forward, the central government has put forward. It's about our behavior as well. We're not looking necessarily just to fund those things, but we have a lot of projects throughout the country where we're listening and learning to Indians, saying this is a way that you can cut your emissions in half, reduce your plastics, take the methane that exists in all of our waste facilities. We're seeing some fires in Delhi right now because of that. And instead of that being a problem, tap it to be a solution.
Right. Now, just moving away from the topic of climate change and green energy, Ambassador, I'd like to ask you also about the current election process that is underway in India. Now, we've seen a lot of criminal action against certain opposition leaders. This was a cause for concern. Was the summoning of the US Deputy Chief of Mission unprecedented? And have US concerns been addressed?
Look, we are very excited that the democratic aspirations of almost 1 billion voters are being realized in what is the biggest vote anywhere in the world. And we know that elections are complex things. There's always rhetoric that comes out. There's always complicated ways of getting voters. Here in India, I'm always inspired by people who hike up, for 2 days to a remote village or find one person living on top of a mountain to make sure that he can vote. But we will always raise, concerns that we have, but we're, I think, in awe of the entire democratic process as it happens. And we know that this is for Indians to decide. That's what a democracy is, not necessarily for others to come in and say, but for those who are the polity to have a moment where they get to decide who is going to, for the next 5 years, be their government.
Right. The probe into the attempted assassination of a Sikh activist, how satisfied are you with developments on the investigation so far?
So far, the Indian government has met the thresholds that we have put forward and that we have collaborated together with them on what was a very serious matter. Obviously, there's a criminal case going on, so I'd refer specific questions to our Department of Justice. But I think for any country, we look to a friend and a partner to say if there is accusations or evidence of something, we expect it to be taken seriously, not just by us, but also by India. So far, the government of India has done just that, and we are satisfied with the progress thus far.
My final question, we are, and this would be about the unfinished agenda. We're seeing geopolitical volatility. We're seeing wars going on in Europe, in the Middle East. In this current atmosphere, our partnership on climate action, on green energy, how does it become all the more important, critical, and the danger if we don't accelerate this partnership now?
We do see so much division in the world. We do see vicious wars that we didn't expect. We see suffering, we see people who have misinformation, suspicion. But I'll tell you one thing that is steady, growing, stronger than ever, and warmer than ever. It's the US-India partnership. And it's really, I think, undergirded by a friendship between our people that is also unprecedented. This is a force for good. That isn't a political line. That is something I see and feel every single day. Doesn't mean we agree 100% of the time what two good friends do. But what it means is if we stop focusing on the kind of narcissism of small differences, sometimes there's commentators or people who would seek to divide us because they're jealous of how close this relationship is. They say, oh, you guys don't actually get along. You guys don't actually have the same interests. I would say the proof is in the pudding. Even in the toughest times, this relationship grows stronger, and in the best of times, it accelerates beyond our dreams. And if we can look back at this moment and say that US and India together were a force for good, not just for our people, but in the world, then I think as the world feels unstable, the US-India relationship will be a foundation of stability for decades to come.
All right, Ambassador Garcetti, thank you so much for joining us on the program, giving us your vision on the Indo-US partnership for climate and green energy. Clearly a very critical aspect of our partnership going forward. Thank you once again.
Absolutely. It's a great joy to be with you. Thank you.